Hello, I am the Ronan Pawn, and welcome to a twitch.tv/Ronan Pawn live stream on twitch.tv/Ronan Pawn in the AM. It's about 9:55 in the AM. Where I am, where are you, and what time is it there? It doesn't matter because no one's here. You'll have to tell me in the comments section. Answer back right now. There's a comment section? Well, on YouTube there is. pawnlive.ronanpawn.com, you know it. Listen, people. I've got places to be and things to do today, or places to do and things to be today. So one of those. Strike it, reverse it. Today is going to be the day where I drive out and visit my mom for Mother's Day, but also for celebrating my birthday. So, that being the state of things, I decided that I wanted a live stream and I'm going to be doing some coding anyway, so here we are. Without the green screen, without the fancy setup. But here we are nonetheless, moving into a interesting, just turn you down a little bit more, but leave you in the background, moving into it's kind of a difficult, slog of the process of making this program, getting near the end, but it means that I've got so many messes here and there in the other place that there needs cleanup, but I'm not close enough to where I can do the cleanup yet. I gotta keep making messes. So, in case you're unfamiliar, what we are writing in Python is this, my ClusterTruck Auto Splitter. There's been some changes since the last time this was on the stream. You'll notice that when the settings window do pop out, the screen go off as well as the LED go off. LED being used as a plural there. The LEDs go off, and also these fields are actually being populated from the variables that are being ganked out of the settings file, the settings.config, so a number of little changes, and in fact, as much as these are little changes, this one in particular took me quite a while to do. So the idea of being able to change the reset key, my thought was that you'd click on it, it would pop up and tell you to press, dummy, and then you'd be like, what do you mean press? And you'd go and you'd like click over here and then it would stop. It actually took a lot of iterations to get to this sort of design cycle where, what's the easiest, most sensible way to handle the various ways that a user might interact with the reset key here. When you click it, it goes into press mode, and if you click anywhere off of it, if you click out of the window, in fact, I'm going to have to drag you over here. Let's get rid of the background there. If I drag you over here and I click on it and then I click out of it, we lose focus, then that also just cancels the operation immediately. However, if you do press another key, then it registers that you have now set a different key. I've also changed the way that I'm handling the catching of the key because, sadly, the keyboard library from just for Python, apparently the one that everybody uses that's literally named keyboard, that I got from, or at least found the reference to on PyPy, the website, is kind of bad. I mean, I guess it's useful. It just takes a lot to get, to verify that a key being pressed is indeed the key being pressed. The key that we've been using is the 3 key, on the numpad 3, incidentally. Show me your sublime text, says Pawnzister. My sublime text. Okay. No, I will. My sublime merge, I can give you that, and then here's my GitHub. Is that the kind of sublime text that you were talking about there? The latest, if you go to github.com, you want to download my active development library for making tkinter work, then you'll have to go to github.com/ronanpawn/guiable. GUIABLE. You actually have it, says Bonzister. I do. Unregistered, unlicensed, just stealing. But yeah, I actually do. Noah Craw got me to download Sublime Merge for when we're going to actually, end up working together on some stuff. But, so, trying to get the keyboard thing to actually grab the correct key is a little bit tricky because the Python's keyboard module, or at least this particular keyboard module, which is written by Beaupre, github.com, Beaupre keyboard. It kind of obfuscates what actual keys you're pressing. you can get at the scan codes for like, okay, this key is equal to, that number of scan code, but getting at either one or the other really won't tell you what you need to know. Because if I want just the numpad 3 to work, then I need the key code that's associated with it to differentiate between the number 3 and the number 3, The keyboard 3 and the numpad 3, they're different keys, so I need the scan code for that. But I also can't just use the scan code for that, because the scan code for the 3 key is the same as the page up and page down. It's the same as the page down key. If you turned numlock off, you'd get the same response. So I have to check both the name that's coming out of the keyboard event and the scan code in order to get a confirmation. So now in my code, the storage of what the key you're pressing is first the actual name of it and then the scan code in order to make sure that the key that you're registering is the one that you're registering. Also, a little nuisance that came up while I was looking into the keyboard module is that there's a command for like reading hotkeys. The nuisance of the hotkeys is that it stores the last hotkey that you pressed and kind of combines the last hotkey with new data that comes through. It's broken, basically. I found a bug. Of course I found a bug. I'm the bug magnet pawn. And it's broken, so it stores the last hotkey, which means that even if there's no hotkey currently firing and you ask what's the current hotkey, it will tell you the last hotkey, which could be useful on its own, especially if you had a method for clearing that out and saying, no, don't give me a hotkey if there's nothing going on, just tell me if there is one. And you can do that. It's just all very convoluted and overcomplicated. And in addition to that, the bug is that if you load up a hotkey, by which I mean a hotkey would be holding down, Control Shift and then hitting C, as opposed to just hitting like the C key. So that would be a combination of keys being hit. That's a hotkey. If you hit Control Shift C and you had this thing running and it was like logging the hotkeys, then it would show you Control Shift C. And then if the next time you pulled it, you just pressed V, it would say Control Shift CV. And then if you did Control Shift Alt D, you'd probably get Control Shift C Alt D V. It gets really complicated because it's broken. So I had to abandon using hotkeys and write my own function to grab the hotkeys. Pawnzister says, I did all the coding that I did in Linux and ran tested in the shell, says Pawnzister. I would like to test this. I mean, the cluster truck, the auto-splitting features of it, they actually use Win32, methods and stuff, because I'm only making it cluster truck as far as I know, only plays on Windows. So that shouldn't be a problem there, but I would like to be able to test my my library that I've been writing on Linux and Mac, because I've been writing it as generically as possible, as just sticking with tkinter's methods, staying close to the hardware there, or rather to the library, which that library has been written to be cross-platform. So as long as I stick with the methods of the library and don't try and go outside and override crazy things, I'm hoping that, everything will just work across all the platforms. That being said, the different window managers for Mac and Windows and X, which is usually what's used on a Linux system, God knows how they handle things differently. What I've done here with being able to have a program like this, that the taskbar over there, that it drags, and that this is a false window, but that still controls, it's a second window controlling the first one. Who knows what behavior you'd see on X, on Linux. I would assume that Mac is very similar, but still, who knows? I'd love to test it. I really should set up a virtual machine just so that I can... soon enough, though, I will be playing with Linux, because today, in addition to going out to my mother's to celebrate my birthday and Mother's Day, we're just combining them. No, they don't fall on the same day, but, it's a trip. Windows has a PowerShell, right, says Pawnzister. It does. In addition to that, my dad and I are going to stop off at Micro Center on the way, so that I can basically pick out what he's buying me for my birthday, which is going to be, probably a couple of Adafruits, little microcontroller things that actually, they support Python something. You can plug these Adafruits in and program in Python and program straight to the chip, and that's really cool. So I want a couple of those to play around with, like Arduino, says Bonesister. Exactly like Arduino. Yeah. In fact, I think all of Adafruits are built to be, cross-compatible with Arduino. But in fact, I've probably got it pulled up still if I go looking for it. Yeah. So here's the Adafruit for use with CircuitPython and Arduino IDE. So this is the kind of stuff that I'd be looking into grabbing up. Specifically the ones that support CircuitPython, because it's just what I've been programming in, very happily for the past month and a half or more. So yeah, I want to keep playing with Python and get myself a little breadboard and shove some components in there and just play. Maybe eventually replace this USB numpad that I've got externally that's doing a lot of, like, the reason why there's this on all of my live streams is because this is a deep hardware software solution, or well, it's deep, it's a hardware level software solution somebody wrote up that allows you to rebind like certain key combinations, because the problem with a USB numpad is it doesn't register as another keyboard. So if you want it to be seen as another keyboard, you gotta do something to get a difference between this numpad and the numpad on your actual keyboard. So that's what this thing is doing. It's remapping like the numpad plus key to right alt plus num plus, so that I can get a distinguishment between when I hit one of these and when I hit one of these, which is really, convoluted kind of solution. Works okay-ish. Can you make a USB Guitar Hero controller for me? Thanks, says Bonesister. Probably. I mean, the level of things you can do with a little Adafruit, and also with a Raspberry Pi, which is another thing that I'm interested in doing, because I've got this electronic drum kit over here that needs to be plugged into a computer to work. It doesn't have its own brain, so why not grab a $30 Raspberry Pi, and now you got a computer, and line it into that, and people have already done the work on that too, like most of or all of the work, where you can set up a Raspberry Pi to act as a MIDI controller and then just line the inputs in and you're good. So I do want to do that. But for today, we're working on the program now. To come back to the things that are happening here, when I click this, it is storing both even though I might just press like C, it's storing C, and it's also storing the scan code that was associated with C when I pressed it, so that if there was another C key, like there are for all of the numbers, then you'd still be able to tell which one it was that I was pressing. I might want to go back to, I actually wrote a little function, and I pulled it out of my programming, but a function to allow hotkeys, even though in this library hotkeys are a little bit broken. The one by Bopre here, which the thing that's broken is, let's see, I think it's read underscore hotkey. Anything really associated with hotkeys is broken, because they just keep stacking on top of each other. It keeps like a memory of the last hotkey that was pressed, and they just, yeah, you can use it once and then it's done. And the library doesn't drop the old data, so it keeps like corrupting the next set of data, is what I've found anyway. But I might build my own my function back in, so that you can do like key combinations. I just don't know if it's possible in LiveSplit over here. So can you do that in LiveSplit if I were to like try to change the settings here? Like my start split is numpad set hotkey. Can I do Control Shift C? I can. So I will want to support that then. Numpad 1, I will want to support the ability for you to do hotkeys, and then I'll have to check for them. And I didn't do that before because it's a bit of a, I don't know, it'll probably be fine, but it could conceivably be a little bit of a slowdown in the program, because right now the way that I'm doing it is I'm not setting up like a hook event for keyboard activity. What I'm setting up is like each tick of the frame. If I put this back in, we're doing 120 frames right now. more or less, and each tick of that frame it checks to see if you've got the key down. So right now it's bound to the numpad 3. If I press 3, it starts firing the reset action. So I'll either have to do it as a binding, which I've also had trouble getting working in the keyboard library, and that's really the test of a good library, isn't necessarily does it work or does it not work. It's how convoluted is the implementation, how complicated, how difficult is it for someone to like reach in and start using something. Because if you've got like callbacks on callbacks on callbacks in your library, then, you know, it may work beautifully when you know how to use it, but like it's not a great library if you have to study the fucking documentation to death before you can start getting going on it. And I've several times tried to switch over to a you know, binding that's just going to monitor all key activity, and every time I try and do it, there's a problem or 6, and then I go, oh, fuck it, it was working fine before. What is the goal of the program you're working on, says Bonzister? Well, it actually functions right now, and I'm just trying to get it to where it's got a UI and you can configure things and save and make adjustments and whatnot. But what it is ClusterTruck Auto Splitter. So for speedrunners, that's why I pull open Live Split while we're running. This program will actually be watching the screen while you're playing ClusterTruck, and it will detect when it should fire a split. So once the timer gets started, if we were going right now and then it needed to fire a split, this program will be the one to, boom, fire the split for you and send it through. So that's what it does, and it already functions. It already works fine in terms of the code, but I'm trying to build it into a GUI so I can start circulating it, and so you can actually change the settings, you know, from within the program without having to edit settings.config files and whatnot. And also the functionality that I'm trying to support here is the ability to, these are all tests that are being run by the screen monitor, and I wanted to give you the option to be able to turn some of them off if you wanted to, and this kind of came about when I circulated it to AJ 213, I think it is, or is it 231? I'm always confused. But AJ, who is the second fastest speedrunner in the any percent category, I gave it to him, and he said, yeah, but I don't want it to do this, I don't want it to do that. And my answer was, well, you can go into the files and just, like, remove this part of it, and then it won't do that. So basically, like, runtime pause. You know, if you're running and you hit the pause button, if that test is active, then it will fire an event, and the event will be pause the timer. It won't be a split, it'll be pause the timer. But if you turned it off, then it would no longer do the pausing of the timer for you. If you didn't want it to fire a split when the credits roll, then you could turn that off. So it's kind of like a lot to do just to add that little bit of functionality, but honestly, I don't know what this program would have looked like, what I would have been showing to the user, if not this anyway, so, you know. Could the same thing not be done with auto hotkeys, says Bonzister? Not with screen monitoring, no. Because it's very much it's a capture-heavy solution. I believe people have actually set up auto hotkey to do screen cap. I mean, as long as you Control Shift Alt, that kind of thing. But processing the images, and then analyzing them against a thing and being able to grab a whole bunch of screenshots per second. This thing runs currently at 60 frames per second. So auto hotkey was not a solution. And I'm very familiar with auto hotkey, so also I wouldn't want to program something this complicated into auto hotkey. Because, you know, auto hotkey is fine when you're using it on a very top level kind of a thing, but man, getting deep into it, that language is just, it's very complete, and it's also very specific unto itself, you know? But all that works, it's all set up, and it's also set up in such a way as we could have multiple files. So this program could theoretically work on any game for which you wrote patterns for it. You click the load file button, you're loading clustertruck.config, and you get these files loaded in. Right now, it's just loading those in from the start. PBR is bad, beers is Ponzi. You're just trying to keep me talking to you. It's sweet. It's sweet beer. It's the same as, what's the other one that I've been drinking sometimes? Like Stroh's or something like that? It's just the same friggin' formula. It's a sweet not that high alcohol percentage beer, and, you know, you just want to take the edge off of constant chronic fatigue syndrome, it's a good solution. Anyway, we need to update my to-do list so that I know what I am to-doing. So first off, appropriate timerless GUI, I'm going to say we're done there. Like, that's, wow, look at all the things that I've done in the process of making this, and I haven't looked at this to-do list in ages. So if we just put that in, appropriate timerless GUI, you know, built. What else have we got in the to-do list? Split by world, probably not going to offer that as an option. At least not in the early versions. If I get a lot of feedback saying, but I want it to do it like this, then I really don't want to have to support that. It's just, it's inelegant. It's an inelegant solution to a problem that isn't a problem if you just use a different kind of a splits file. Disable pausing and final splits from GUI settings. Pausing and final splits, which would be here. So pause if out of game, final splits, disabled, enabled grouping. So this is everything that I've already set up here is what I'm talking about there. So that's true. I mean, it's not working yet, but the fact that it's there means, you know, I know what I'm working on. I'm going to finish it. I'm not going to forget, and that's what the to-do list is about. You know, done. Like, well, it's visually implemented, we'll say. Visually implemented. Finish it. But other than that, the concept is what needed to be noted. Export adjusted resolution patterns. Might not do that because my patterns actually just kind of work. I was very surprised when I handed this off to Noah, who plays at 1440p, that he said, it just works. And I was like, really? Yeah, just works. Wow. After he changed his resolution to what it is, and I've got built-in processes that, you know, whatever the patterns were written at is included in the patterns file, and then if you hand in a higher value, then it, at the beginning of loading them in, it upscales all of the, or downscales all of the calculations to try and hit it. And he said it was working really good. He probably just didn't test it long enough. I'm sure it starts to break when you start, you know, shrinking and enlarging pixels like that. 1440, though, it might work because, you know, you're just adding pixels. If you're scaling down, that I would think would have a greater likelihood to fail. But whatever. So in terms of bugs, test live split connection active before attempt communication. Okay, I remember what that idea was. I don't know if it's a good one or not. I'm just going to leave it there. Final split didn't fire for AJ. Don't know why. Does not split after manual final split and restart. Still in the running state. Test for run ended somehow. Okay, yep, I remember that bug. Fires on level complete exit in 720p upscaled resolution. Right, I don't. That's another AJ bug. AJ reported a false positive on 9.3. Study the input and update the pattern. I think I probably already did that. He sent me a picture. I'm sure I looked at it. It was false positive? No, I did look at it, but it was a false positive, which sucks. It means that the pattern needs to be even more specific. AJ getting extra split when clicking the next level button without the auto splitter. Yeah, these are all AJ's bugs. There's nothing I've done about those as of yet. I've been working on the GUI. Unsplit unknown false splits. That is something that I think I'm going to add as a option in here to be able to do that. Andable patterns. I think I've decided against andable patterns. Yeah. The idea for an andable pattern is the idea that you need to match both patterns in order for something to happen, and honestly, if you need to match both patterns in order for something to happen, then you should just write one pattern that includes both of those patterns. So yeah, andable patterns is dead. I'm going to add it to the list as things that I've cleared from the table. Andable patterns, question mark, I'll add that to it because it was always a question. No, just write a pattern that includes all requirements. and then you've got your andable pattern. And it doesn't save anything, time to have to check two things and then check them individually. So yeah, just write it that way. Okay, so there's my to-do list, and I just wanted to clear it out because I need to add to it, because now we're talking about to-do for the GUI. And in terms of to-do for the GUI, sorry, I had to call my mom, says Pawn Sister. Yeah, happy Mother's Day. Isn't it? I mean, I'm going to my mom's later, so that's why I'm live streaming early, so I hope it's Mother's Day. So let's see. File variable loading. So, load configs patterns from GUI. Because right now it's like it's loading them and it's shoving them in there regardless of what the state is. But all of that code needs to be moved over to the GUI. The apply on insert. So apply changes to settings on, in fact, apply save changes to settings on insert of settings tab. Oh, there go the cats. Save on close, and that's the other question to answer. Apply save. Do I save settings on close? Live split LED, so all LEDs working. And those are going to be, so one of them is going to represent live split activity. One of them is going to represent run state. And one of them is going to represent pattern detected. Okay. Disable default buttons on insert. Okay. Yep. Disable the reset to defaults button on settings insert, because that's for right here. You see that this little thing is still visible, and when I mouse over it, you can just see it changing a little bit, and that's because it's still active. That button doesn't do anything right now, but I need it to be disabled when you insert it, because you can actually still get your mouse over it and click on it. So that's a thing. What else needs to be done here? Make selected pattern equal top. Yes. So when pattern is active, yeah, they're going at it. They're going at each other. Move pattern on screen. If not, top. So the idea there would be, if this list were longer than fit in the space, and I had a scroll bar going on there, and the one that fired was down here, the idea would be to try and move that one to be the top position, to be right up here, because it's the one that last fired. Which, in the event of it's the bottom one, would just try to push it up there and it would get it on screen anyway. So that's why I'm putting top question mark there, because I could just get it so that it's on screen at the bottom, but might as well center it to the top until I find out that that's a bad idea. And then what have we got? Yes, we've got, in fact, I'll put that under bugs. So we've got reset key held equals recursion depth error. So right now, however it is that I'm doing the reset is something where if you hit the reset button enough, the reset key enough, if you hold it down, it will eventually have called the reset function from within, the reset function or something like that. It's calling it, and I guess it's not exiting the last thing that it called or something, so the recursion depth stacks and stacks and stacks until Python goes, yeah, you need to exit the function, so that's a little bug that I have to handle at some point. I think that's all the things that I noted down. There are more to-dos and more bugs, but those are the things that I wrote. You should play KSP and program all your missions with Kerbal Operating System. I'd watch that. KOS, that's the one where you actually, like, tell it, when to stage and when to fire and all that kind of stuff, right? It's a cool premise. Been around for a while. I like it, though. I'd like it more if Kerbal, or if maybe somebody modded Kerbal to, like, just modded the whole career mode to sort of wrap around that concept, so that you could basically build an automated space center. You would write the code and the missions and get it so that, here's the weight of this, like, for this ship, here's the launch cycle and here's what I want it to do when it goes up, and then turn it into more of a management sim where you could, get involved if and when you wanted to, and interrupt things. But it'd be neater to, like, set up a whole, space program that's just going, where you schedule the launches, and then when the launches take place, they just take place because they're all on a set of scripted events, and be fun. KOS has its own API that you can use to control your rockets, automate your rockets, rather. Yeah. Yeah. I remember, is KOS also the one that has the mod objects that you can just sort of attach to the side of a thing and then set them? Because I know that there's a mod where you can sort of attach, like, an atmospheric detector to the side of it and then set it to a certain level of atmosphere, and when it gets to a certain height, it will automatically fire a stage. So another way of sort of automating that. But is that KOS, or is KOS pretty specifically like just a programming thing where you're actually putting the code in and telling it what to do at what point? Does it get its information from pieces that you attach to it, or does it get its information from, like code command line query kind of stuff? Because I remember there's definitely one that did it that way too, for automating things, where you'd slap a sensor on, and then when the sensor reached its place, it would do the thing you told it to, which is also pretty cool. Kind of a cool way of doing it. Okay, this is very flexible. Check it out. Okay. I know I've looked at it before, but certainly not, like, in any depth. So Pawn's sister. There's my little to-do list there, and I've got it written down as well. The big deal that needs to be done is the variable is just loading all of the things in from the GUI, letting and there is no main loop on this GUI. It's being run by the core code of the screen cap stuff, and updating it 60 frames per second, which is a bit of a waste, but I would have to, I suppose, look into multi-threading in order to do both of them side by side without one getting in the way of the other. I think I'd probably have to do something like that, and I'm not ready for that. So it works right now. So yeah, what have we got now? We've got these, all of these are loaded. The values of all of these are being loaded from the file when they load in. So these are all in the on state because they are all true in my settings file. If I restart the program, since I made some changes there, you'll see that the key is 3. Its scan code is 81. You don't see the scan code there. Do I want to build back in my support for hotkey? That'll be a bit of a thing. Yeah, let's do that because you're sort of already in the headspace for that, or you were recently. So for supporting the hotkey, in fact, if I just go back over to the keyboard thing, and I pop open the issues, and then I search for, sure, issue is open, and then it's hotkey. Anything that includes hotkey, we're looking for just somebody saying, all right, how about we take that out, and we do hotkey reading bug, because I commented on this and then posted my solution for it. So maybe I'll just grab my solution back out, which is this code primarily. So under the git key command, this got really stupidly complicated. Again, to support the keyboard thing and try and get everything to work the way that I need it to, just ridiculously complicated for just this little operation to click there and get the key that you want out. Why didn't ClusterTruck have a leaderboard set up originally, asked Ponzister. And can this upload scores to a web server, says Ponzister. Did they not have a leaderboard set up originally? They have their own leaderboard set up now, anyway. And can this upload scores to a web server? Am I able to hack ClusterTruck's leaderboards with this, is your question, I believe. And the answer is, shh. So, actually, do it. Here's the problem with my method. My method doesn't really work that way anymore. We're doing a keyboard.hook. It could work. It could conceivably work. I also just learned the concept of a non-local. Instead of like, you gotta, globals and static variables, and then there's a non-local variable, which I didn't, variable type, which I needed, and I went looking for and found, oh, it does exist, which is the idea that, like, you've got an inner function nested in another function, and you need to access the value that's in the parent function. So making it non-local instead of having to go global on it. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of purists who are like, you should never use non-local or global, there's never a good situation. If you use it, either you're using it wrong. I'm sure they do say all of those things. So if I were to do it, if I just stuck that in there, new key equals event name, done equals, so yeah, it might just work without me having to look at it. I mean, I wrote the function, so if I press that, then I click out of it, it cancels still. If I do that, and then I hold like Control-Shift-C, nothing happened. Yeah, and are we still active? We are. C space. Okay, so that's not working. It's not working. So, well keyboard, are we still running? We are. Well keyboard is modifier. So when we fire the do it command, that means that a key has been pressed down. Right, and then new key equals read key. Print red first. Let's see if that happens. So, click there, Control, Shift, C, space. No, start it up and do it without the controls and shifts and stuff. Yeah, it's not falling through there when I do it this way. So we're stuck on the read key event, I have to assume then. But it's supposed to be a blocking event. So that's weird. Because if it's a blocking event, new key equals, I'll tell you what it should be. New key will equal event dot name. And then we won't be stuck underneath that read key event, because we've already got the event coming in from the fact that something went down, a button pushed, so we're triggering that to happen. And then we'll load that in as the new key. Hotkey and last key will be equal to the new key. New key will be equal to keyboard.read key if new key, and so forth and so on. And this new key equals event name, that's going to have to be something different now. New key will be what new key is at the end of it. Let's see how that changed anything. If I just hit C, then we got C back. If I hit Shift Control C, then it just gets like stuck. It's now stuck, but we're still active. Shockingly. Shockingly, we're still active in there, and the program is still running at the frame rate and everything. Weird. Weird. So well keyboard.is modifier, new key. So if the key that was pressed is a modifier, sure, the new key is equal to keyboard.read key, which means we end up waiting for that to happen, and maybe... Maybe it doesn't work because read key is, like, no longer functioning because we've got the binding going on? So yeah, if I just hit one key after pressing that, then we're fine. But if I were to hold shift and then C, no. If I release shift and then hold C, no. See, this is like, it gets so stupidly complicated. So stupidly. Oh, but when I clicked out of it, it canceled out of what we did and we got the shift back. But yeah, it's getting stuck on the read key. So read key is not functioning, which is cool, isn't it though? Read key isn't functioning, and presumably it has to do with the fact that we're within the event for this keyboard hook that I set up in order to trigger it all. So if instead of using the keyboard hook, if I look back at the code that I put up there, read key is a blocking event, so it will wait for input to come in and it will stop all of the operations, including like screen redraws and stuff like that. And I'm trying to avoid that because if you stop screen redraws long enough, then the program Windows will be like, oh, this program's crashed. Do you want to close this program? So I want this to keep running, which is why I was doing things the way I was doing it by setting up a hook. And again, it's something that really should be like supported by the library. Like obviously this is going to come up. So how do you, just get a fucking key out without blocking? And the best way that I've come up with to do, I guess, is, how about instead of waiting for the key, well, keyboard dot is modifier new key is equal to keyboard dot rekey. Well, new key is equal to event dot name. So new key should never be equal to keyboard dot read key. Yeah, it would be though. It would be, but the first thing that would have to happen is like hotkey would have to get written. Oh well, it does. It gets written to the hotkey. So new key is our temporary holder there. Hello, random aim. Hello, man. Today, Pawn ASMR is on point. The calm voice, the tongue clicks, and so on. Just missing the mic brushing to put me to sleep. And this is a good hour to get some Z's. Hello, random name. So if I just don't use that blocking thing there, if I were to lock it into, I've already locked it into a loop with, well, the keyboard is modifier. So if there's a modifier being held down, which is a control shift or an alt, then I could just constantly set new key equal to whatever the keyboard is actually reading. Problem is, I can't get that out. How am I getting that out there? Well, I've set up a hook in order to do it. Yeah, shit. See, that's another thing that you would expect, like, keyboard dot what's the current state, would be a thing that you'd expect that you could get out of this keyboard module, and it would make things so much fucking easier for me if I could just, like, pull the keyboard and see what's the keyboard reading right now. Without having to put it into a blocking state, without having to rely on a hotkey function that stores the last hotkey that you pressed and then adds to it and corrupts its own value as time goes on. Like, what is going on the keyboard presently? And I can at least do that with, like, the stack something. If I go back to the API for this, back one more apparently, even more. Will you just get me back to this? Okay, so back to the API. We've got key down, key up, which are just, bindings, the event symbols. keyboard event. So, like, that's a class, keyboard event. So how do I get, like, what is the current event or what's the current state? All modifiers, no sided modifiers, is modifier, key to scan codes, parse hotkey, keyboard.send, keyboard.press, keyboard.release. So these are like, you can send these signals to the keyboard. Keyboard.isPressed is a query of like, if you could just do keyboard is pressed without any value in it and it would return whatever is currently the mouse down or the key down state, that'd be fucking brilliant, wouldn't it? But you can't. You have to, it's a test against what key, you think it should be. As far as I know, let me just double check on that. Returns true if the key is pressed, and that's all it says about it. So that's not what I need either. On press, on release, these are hooks. I don't need a hook. I mean, I don't want a hook. I just want to check it right now. Like at a certain point, I want to look at it and say, what is it currently? And you can do that with the stash state. But I want it in the names and not the scan codes. At this point. Parse hotkey, remap, block key, remap key, add hotkey, remove hotkey. These are all hooking events. Remap hotkey. And then you get the stash state, which returns scan codes or key codes as opposed to like the key names. And I need to get the key name out of it. Keyboard.write, keyboard.wait, keyboard.getHotkey name, read event. All of these read event, read key, read hotkey are blocking events that won't do anything until, the input comes in. And I don't want those. Get typed strings. I don't know what those are. Get typed strings. Given a sequence of events, tries to deduce what strings were typed. Strings are separated when a non-textual key is pressed. Such as tab or enter. Okay, so that seems to be like a get the sentence command. Understood. Back up to the top. Start recording, stop recording. I guess I could probably use that. Or record, play, add word listener, add abbreviation. So start recording. Starts recording all keyboard events into a global variable, or the given queue, if any, which returns the queue of events and the hooked function. So I could do a start recording when you press that button, and then when I detect, starts recording all events into a global variable. So if I detect the last thing stored into the variable is not an augmenting key, not Control Shift Alt, that kind of stuff, then I could say, okay, stop the recording because we've got all the things that we wanted. And it's such a roundabout, the fucking bend way of doing this. If I just had a single method for checking what is the current state of the keyboard, what is the last state that you registered, because the last state is going to be the current state. So if I've pressed down on something, then that's what state we're in. And if I press another thing, then that would be the state that we're in. The state we're in feels like forever. When you click the button, it does all of these things. If I could get it, it's like I need a nested set of keyboard hooks or something. Whenever anything is pressed, keyhook, keyboard.hook, do it. So on the mouse down, it will call, or on the key down, it will do that. Since it's just a straight hook event, it should also do it on the mouse up, but by the time the mouse comes up, we've already done what we're doing and we're out, so it works. If I changed that to keyboard dot down, what do you got for down? Nothing on down? Press, maybe? on press. So if I change that to on press, then it should still work as it's been working, hopefully. Click there, on press 7. Yeah, as long as it's a single character that nothing bad happens, but since I'm trying to grab the hotkey, also if I hit Control-Shift-C, then we are where we are right now. If I click out of it, it tells me Shift was the last thing, which is weird. Control-Shift-C, C was the last thing that I pressed. Again, it likes the word Shift for some reason. Control-C is still Shift. So, yeah, it's fucked, basically. So since I can't use read key here, when we do it, I think I can just not use any of this stuff. This is what it used to look like. New key equals event name, done equals true. So the idea would be that I could just not set the done event until we're done if what? If keyboard dot is modifier. If not keyboard is modifier, then done true. What did you want? Parameter key. Sorry. What did the thing that I wrote look like? Shit, I gotta find it again. Shit, or I could undo to it over here in my own code and then redo to it. So take me back to that. If keyboard dot is modifier new key, right? Got it. So if not keyboard is modifier new key, then we're done. Otherwise, we're not done, motherfucker. It does mean you'll be able to hit Control, Shift. Shit. Like, you won't be able to bind it to just Control or just Shift or just Alt if I do it this way, because it will always register that as a modifier key. So it's got to get even more complicated. I got to go back to keyboard dot, what was it? Was it bind? It was, what is it? Hook. Keyboard dot hook. Hook will hook all of the events, which will be mouse down and mouse up. So, if not keyboard is modifier, new key, like, what I need to check for first is, are we mouse upping? If we're mouse upping, then we're done. So yeah, if event dot, and what are the characteristics of keyboard events again? Event type. So if event dot event type, and what kind of event types do we have here? Keyboard dot key up is equal to keyboard dot key up, even though it could just be up. So if it's equal to up, then we're done, baby. We're done. Is equal to true, and return. If we drop past that, which could also be an else, I guess we could do, instead of putting the return there. Done equals true. We could make this an elif. Elif not keyboard is modifier new key. Then we're done. Do I even need to check that? Like, if we haven't keyed up, Basically, what I'm thinking, in case I haven't explained it and I haven't, is the idea of when you're hitting a hotkey, when you're holding down Control Shift and then hitting C. Just for example, doesn't matter. Could be anything, but Control Shift C. Control goes down, Shift goes down, C goes down, and then you come up off of them. So when you come up off of them, if you registered the Control, the Shift, and the C when you went down, then you've got a list of all of the keys that are a part of this hotkey that you want to be able to test for later. So if I store that list, we're good. In the event that the key comes up, we're done. Otherwise, if the key that we've pressed is not a modifier, then that would do it instantly. But we honestly don't need to do it instantly. So that might be the only test that we really need for setting the done event. And otherwise, we need to be storing like a complete thing. Like a complete... We need to be taking in the event and adding it. The event name to what we already had. So, yeah. I need to use some kind of a bathroom, like, now. My bathroom needs have been growing. So, we're going to take a bathroom break. Might as well take a 7-minute live stream break when we come back. I'm on to it now, though. I know what we need to do, but we might as well take ourselves our first live stream break, regardless of how long we've been here. And when we come back, I'll make this thing work off of this library that, like, if they'd just given me different tools, this would be simple. But they didn't, so time to pee. Pawn not out. Hello, I am the Ronin Bond, and welcome back. What happened, asked Sister? My bowels needed moving. So I've moved them. Let's keep moving code. I think I've wrapped my head around this keyboard affair, and I think I maybe have been unfairly criticizing this library, the keyboard library for Python. Although maybe not, because I don't understand how it's doing what it's doing. My complaint was that there was no way for me to just query the keyboard and see what state it is in currently. And I realized one thing and then the other. First, I realized that if I want that behavior, all I have to do is set up a hook event, which is basically, I've been thinking about it, differently, weirdly. Setting up a hook event is basically like turning this library on. Until you set up a hook event, nothing's happening, so it's not consuming any processing power, and, that's a good thing. So if I want to be able to see what the last event was, I can totally do that. Just do it, make a hook, and then query what the last event was based on a variable where you're storing what the last event was, that kind of a deal. So it's no big deal to set that up, which is what I'm about to do. But the second thing that I realized on top of that is that when this library is inactive, it is still doing things, because I can query the stash stack or whatever it is that's in here in the library. What did you call it? Stash state. Builds a list of all currently pressed scan codes, releases them, and returns the list. So, it's got a method for grabbing what's currently active. And the only problem that I have with this is that it returns the scan codes and not the key that was pressed. So, as I said before, the numpad 3, shares the scan code for the page up button, because when numlock is on, it does one thing, and when numlock is off, it does the other thing. And, if you've got a method for reaching in and finding out, what the current stuff is, then you are constantly building, or at least you're able to gather that data in one quick function from the low-level keyboard queries, from the hardware level, that kind of thing. So why is it that you can't figure out which key was pressed from that data as well, I mean, if you've already got something, so it's not monitoring it, but it can reach in and grab it. So maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's the reason it's a limitation of how it does what it does, that it can only query the hardware level Yeah, the hardware level of the keyboard state when you ask it to see what's going on all at once. But if you set up a monitoring event by hooking in, then it can also monitor the operating system level event and find out what key the operating system thinks the key that was just pressed is, or something like that. I mean, it really does get me to the point where, okay, if the numpad 3 is the same scan code as the page down thing, regardless of whether numlock is on or numlock is off, then again, it would just be a level of, like, assembling that data, wouldn't it? So it's something that could be in the library but isn't, because it could query, surely it could query the state of whether numlock is on or off, and then it would be able to return me not just the list of scan codes, but it would be able to know that the numpad 3 is the numpad 3 and not the page down. But then again, numlock being on or off, if numlock is off, then that means 3 is page down, but also page down is page down. When the numlock is on, then page down is still page down, but 3 is not. And how do you tell the difference between between actually pressing page down and pressing numpad 3 if the scan code is the same? You know, because if it's the same scan code, and then you'd go, well, you'd test if numlock is on, but numlock can be on and I hit the page down button, and you'd get the same scan code. I don't know. There's some kind of hardware level layer, something that I don't understand about keyboards that, if we give it the benefit of the doubt, this library probably just can't do what I'm asking it to do because of that. But again, if the operating system can tell the difference between a page down and numlock 3, in any event, all I need to do is be able to tell what was the last, like, key down. And I think I also need to be able to grab, like, the last key up. Well, I need to trigger an event on the key up. The idea here is that we grab... what do we grab? We grab a list of all the keys that have been pressed until we hit one that was not a modifier key. And I can get all of the keyboard events and stack them. Yeah. I could get all the keyboard events just by turning on a recording, because this library does support the idea of recording, which is up here at the top of the API, the idea of start a recording, stop a recording. And then that will create a list of all the events that took place from one end to the other. Or I could basically then I'm going to have to parse through that list and deal with it all. So I'd rather just deal with it as events. So then if it's key down events that I'm looking for, on the first key down event, I need to lock myself into a loop where I continually check for more key down events, basically, until we get a key up event. Yeah. Kinda. So if I set up this hook, which is a generic hook, which will see keyboard down and keyboard up events, and new key equals the event.name, this will fire when you press a key. It will fire once, and it will leave us in this loop. Or where is it? This loop, while not done. So we'll still be sitting in here. I've added a little sleep call there just so that it's not, taxing the CPU ridiculously, because I am forcing updates in order to keep the program from dying via the Windows Manager, the window manager going, well, this program is locked up, when it's not. So we'll be stuck in this loop. I'll have pressed 1. It will have added that to it. We need to start building a list, though, of them all. So new key needs to be a collection. I need to be building a serious list here. And when I'm done, new key is equal to that. Yeah, so I need to be building the list myself. So in addition to new key, I need new code. Or I just need to store these as like an array kind of a thing and have maybe forget about non-localing the new key, at least for now. Like, I think what I'll do actually is make a hotkey. So wherever I use the word new key, let's change it to hotkey. Replace. Next. Replace. 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 And you're gonna end up being like text will be hotkey 0. And then the length of hotkey 0 -1, of course. But so what hotkey is going to be is a 2. It's going to be a multi-dimensional array. So hotkey is equal to self.reset key.cget text. Yeah, that ain't right. When we start up. I could do it all in one thing and say hotkey 0, length of hotkey 0 -1 is equal to that. I mean, I really shouldn't have to, but it'll get me out visually and stuff like that. Let's just forget about that for now. We'll call it display key for that. We'll have another variable, and because it's just getting in my way of actually getting to the meat of the problem here. So we just set up the key hook, and we're watching for any event up or down. We're also going to need done equals false display key. We need last key is equal to. In fact, that's what we could do. Instead of display key, we have last key, which is equal to that. Will be the text that's displayed, which should match the name, so that should work out fine. So we need a last key, and that's what we've got now. And then we hook into all the events. And I'm going to have to get last key in here as well, in terms of the non-locals. And what's your problem? Non-local variable hotkey must be bound in an outer function scope. Right, hotkey doesn't exist yet? Alright, well last key equals hotkey equals. So now that's both of them, and then last key I capitalized, which is why you're complaining about that. Sorry. Now that should work, but last key isn't being used yet. Got it. So we press a button, and then we fall into this deal here. And the idea would be that if last key is equal to event.name, is not equal to event.name, then we want to add to the hotkey plus equal to, and we'll do it as an F string, where I can just put a plus in and then wrap the event name in that like that. So then hotkey will be this key plus the next key plus the next key. And since hotkey has already been set to the starting key there, yeah, except it'll be out of order. We were going to do it as a multi-dimensional array, though, not as two strings, Pawn. Is it how we want to do it? No. Okay, as a multi-dimensional array, then. So that would be hotkey 0 dot append. We have to clear it, is what we have to do, actually, every time we do this. So last key can be equal to that, but hotkey has to be cleared every time. So you're going to have to be this multi-dimensional array that I was talking about, which will look something like that. Yeah, because we're loading up a whole new thing. So there's hotkeys now that, and we're going to hotkey 0 dot append, not plus equal to dot append. This string value, no, we don't need the string value anymore. We just want the event dot name. And then hotkey 1 is going to be the scan code. So event dot, is it scan code? If I go back to the API, it is scan code. So if last key is not equal to event.name, then this shit. Now if I'm setting last key equal to the key that you hit before, it should still work because you can't use a modifier. Yeah. And this will probably be the first test that gets done because we don't want anything that's a key up getting caught. So if the event.event type is equal to keyboard.keyUp, then done equals true and return. Just fall out of that. Otherwise, which would be an elif, but it doesn't really need to be, but fuck it, we'll do it as an elif, because return will just dump it anyway. But elif last key is not equal to event name, then you'll do that. So the last key not equal to event name is keeping us from registering the same key hit twice. Yeah. Now I'm seeing the possibility of something else being a problem. And what is that? The idea of what if you just hit shift and then you come up off a shift. So we need a little test at the end. Once we've fallen through, if done is not equal to cancel, then fire the cancel. And then the last thing would be actually, so before that gets done, we need to test if hotkey is equal to its instantiation state. Then hotkey is equal to last key. Well, then display key is equal to last key. Couldn't I just use last key instead? Yeah. So if hotkey is not equal to its instantiation state, then last key is equal to hotkey I just keep seeing extra problems that are going to pop up before I can finish doing what I'm doing. Last key is equal to hotkey This would be the scan codes are second. That's not right, but okay, hotkey 0, and then hotkey dot or rather length of hotkey. The length of hotkey. I just want the last in there. I wonder if Python has a built-in fucking last. Hotkey 0 dot last. Is that dot last? Nope. Length of hotkey 0 minus 1. Okay. So that'll be last key there. And then in the cancel function, when we are setting the key config, instead of setting it to the last one, well, if we're just going to set it directly to the last one, I don't need to do all that shit. But I need it to work this way because what if you didn't type anything in? So last key, if you did, in the event that hotkey is in fact equal to its instantiation state, then last key will still be the last key that it c-gitted from the... You see? Oh, it's fine. Okay, so this actually, I think, might work theoretically. I'm probably still not there in the code, but all the things that my brain kept coming up with, oh, but what about that? So if I just click out of it, we're fine. Everything still works. If I go back over here, frame rate's still running, so we didn't get locked into any loops. If I then hit C, C fell through. Okay, and then I go back over here. Good, we're not locked into the loop. If I do it again, and now I do Control Shift C, then we get the final character gets printed up here. And then if we go back, we're still not locked into any loops. Good. So that actually did work. When we finish here, though, after the cancel, I'd like you to print what you came up with for hotkey, because it's not being used yet, but it will. So did this work? When I do here, and I say Control-Shift-C. So we got Control, Shift, 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 because I held it down for a bunch, and then C, and then the numbers that associate with that, with those key presses. These are the scan codes attached. So what I need to do is just, if last key is not equal to event name, then hotkey that, and then last key is equal to event name. Yeah, that's the one little bit of code that I forgot to put in. I knew I had to put in, but I forgot I forgot to put it in. So Control-Shift-C. And then we get Control-Shift and capital C with the scan codes of 29, 42, 46. That's exactly what I wanted. It's exactly how I want it out. Now that means that our storage of these variables is going to have to support that. So in settings, we're going to have to support the idea of writing your reset key out as, basically what that array looks like, or some kind of form that's similar to that. So we'll write it to the file correctly, but also in the main program where we are doing this thing, which is each cycle, if keyboard is pressed. Right now we're just checking if the reset key, because it's only one variable right now. You can't do a hotkey. So right now we're just checking whether or not the name and the scan code are equal to what they should be. And that get hotkey name gets ruined too. Yeah, so I can't use that method anyway. So we're going to need a new method for that that's going to test whether or not the hotkey, fucking works. Let's also do this as a little bit of testing before we walk away from this victorious and say, okay, next thing, which is when we print the hotkey, let's also print the keyboard dot hotkey parse hotkey. So this should, well, hotkey 0. This should give me, like, I just want to see what their list looks like. They've got a function here that parses it for you and so that you get it out in a way that's consistent. So if I do this, Control-Shift-C, or rather Shift-Control-C this time. So that's ours, and then theirs is this 42, 54, 29, 57, and 579, 46. So this is like what their parse bullshit does is actually give you all the scan codes that could possibly attach to a shift, a control, and a C, which isn't helpful for us. We don't want that. So basically, their methods, I can't use them because we need this to be specifically the keys that you pressed when you pressed them. They're not generic. We don't want them to be generic. We want it to always be exactly those keys. So we need the scan codes to be 42, not 42 or 54. We need it to be 29, not 29 or 57,629. We don't want all that shit. So I was just checking to see what the parse hotkey function does, and it does something that is not helpful to me. Okay. So we are getting that data out, and we're going to have to write something else somewhere else that will work with that data. But, nuggets, I think I'm happy with this thing now. It seems to be working, and again, we can cancel it anytime. What if I hit Shift and then mouse up? I do get Shift out. So, no, that's a bug. We need you, I don't want you to be able to have Shift. Well, no, you could have Shift, couldn't you? If you wanted Shift to be your hotkey, you could have Shift as your hotkey. Yeah. I don't see why not. Yeah. You could have Control-Shift. And then Control-Shift 2942. Mm-hmm. Why not? No reason why not. So we will. Of course, what we're using is 3. So 381, let's just check that that's still working. Yeah, it still fires it. Good. What? Ah, because it didn't update it. So the hotkey was still equal to, so that part of things is working as well. Excellent. Yeah. Yes, that's how it's supposed to be. Yes. At least for now. Okay, this is working. This is working better than I would have thought. Okay, so we've got the get key thing is back to it now supports hotkeys again. And just one more time, just confirm that, like, if I click in, I click out, I go do something else. I tab, I can have tab. I can have whatever I want. But I go over here, set 3, cool. But if I click out of it, if I lose focus on the window, that all still works. We go back over here, we see that we're still running in the program. Excellent. Good, 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 good. So next thing on the to-do list, and that wasn't even on the to-do list, but it did need to to do, you know. So now it's to did. The big deal is getting the configurations and patterns loaded in at the instantiation time of the GUI. Right now I've got this whole config handler file over here, which is doing all of the things. And I think this all has to just get loaded into the GUI so that we can use it. And I'm really not happy with the way that I've done this. It's really fucking dirty. It's really dirty. It's doing all this. It's dirty. It's non-standard, you know? But I don't want to have to rewrite it. So if we are going to load all of this into the GUI side of things, then we need to import config parser, import OS, and from tkinter import message box. So let's just copy instead of cut, and we'll go over to the GUI, and at the top, let's see, so from tkinter import message box, that will be brought in from config handler import everything. We're not going to do that anymore. Okay. So here, and then we'll group the tkinter imports. And then from GUIable, in fact, since it's my own library, I'll put it at the bottom. Just try and put the things together that match the things. So the imports are all together, the from imports are all together, the tcinters are together. Okay, so that's all in now. Then back over to config handler and the functions for config handler. These are public functions, so put them into GUIable, and no, not GUIable, put them into GUI v2, and so we've got checklist, we've got labeled checkbox, we've got labeled text input, we've got GUI windowable. I think I'm going to put all this stuff right up at the top. So 2 spaces between these bits, just 2 lines, that's how you want it. Now we've got resource path, we got pattern to dict, we got repack screen, and then we've got all of the other things. Well, those are classes. Okay, so we got functions above classes. And then internally, there are functions as well. And do these functions make sense to be internal? Yes, so far. Some of these functions might get moved in to be internal. Oh, cool. Yeah. You want to show it off on the stream? Yeah. Put it up to the webcam here. My dad has a motorcycle. Just bought. There we go. And this is a design that he's going to be stenciling onto it, basically. Yeah. B Ninja. Ninja B. Not sure which way it's said yet. So where am I on this? You're fine with that stuff. Classes now. No classes. We got the functions. The main code here is going to be, this is just so friggin' ugly. So friggin' ugly. So where would you go in GUI? It would be part of the initialization for the GUI. And this is the... Hello, peoples. Nice design, says On Edge. Somebody likes it. Let's see. Define animate settings. So I'm gonna have to package this into a function call just to keep it not as stupidly messy. Hello, On the Edge. How you doing? Define. Let's see. Load file. Right? Read file? Read file, we'll call it. Self and all of that code just shoved into there. Actually, the problem with this is going to be that all of these variables needed to be globally accessible variables. Like by the main program as well as the GUI, they all needed access to this stuff. So maybe this can't be a function. Or it has to be a public function, in which case all of these variables would still be, public, would still be non-public. You'd have to global them all in order for everything to be able to get access to them. How would I do that? Other than to, specifically push things out to global variables. The thing that everybody's like, you should never use global variables. Outside of packing, one thing inside the other. Which I just can't even imagine doing, because these are 2 completely separate processes, and the graphic overlay is the graphic overlay, and then the engine of things is the engine of things, and if the graphic overlay is locked into a main loop, the window is locked into a main loop, then it's not doing what I need it to do, which is monitor the screen constantly, so it can't be like that, which means, yes, I'm going to have a bunch of fucking global variables. Right? Seems that way. Yeah. Certainly seems that way. So can I put that all on one line? Can I define you as a global? as I'm making you. Okay. And then what? Global variable pattern translation is undefined at the module level. So I have to instantiate you as a global and then update you. Oh, that sucks. It sucks for me having to, like, copy, paste kind of stuff. But alright, so these are a bunch of the global-ish variables that we're going to need. And there's more down there. Okay, though. Okay, then. Let's do that. Is this really the side of the program that I want to be handling this, though? If they get loaded in by main 6 the way that I was handling them before, then they would be variables at the root level. And then wherever I called to them, I would global them within, like, the class or the function in order to access that one. But the whole idea of being able to call a function that loads in the next file has to be something that's nested in the GUI, or at least it should be nested in the GUI. So yeah, I guess it's all got to go in there. I don't know. It's a big mess, and it's very confusing to me. We're going to declare a bunch of globals here, and hopefully I understand how that's meant to be done, because I've never really worked with global variables before, because, you know, you're not supposed to. Global pattern translation. So if I just do that, and in fact, could I just, like, comma separate these, and is that a thing you could do? And just to declare a bunch of globals like that, without telling them what they need to be, but that they are global. I mean, without saying global. Hang on. Maybe I should be getting, like, as part of this statement, what they are. So, pattern translation apparently ends up being an array. So if I just did pattern translation is equal to array, no? I made it equal to a lit is that, right? And you also end up being an array. Reset key is going to be an array. Auto clicker is going to be a Boolean. You know, without, do I have to specify, you know, should I just say false? Auto clicker active, it defaults to false until you load something in. Alright, so we'll make it false. Lock to window is also going to be a Boolean, so you'll default to false as well. Pause when inactive is also going to be a Boolean. Pattern file, settings config default settings pattern file, it's going to be equal to a string then. Live split host is going to be equal to a string. And then live split port is going to be equal to an integer eventually. Yeah. And for, in fact, live split host, I'll have it default to localhost, which is what it should be, and I'll have the port default to not that bot, the 16834, which is what the library, or rather what the plugin for live split actually defaults to. Window position is going to be surely an array as well, I would think. I could be wrong. Scroll. In fact, I don't need to scroll down. I can go over to config handler and see window position is equal to, no, it's going to be equal to a string. Going to be equal to a string. Okay. So window position in GUI is going to be, let's have it like +0 +0, or +100 +100. for its default for where the window will open. That's what window position is where the window will open. And that's what allows it to, if I close it down here and then start it back up, it's just going to fail because it's a mess there. But it would start where I closed it last because it updates the settings.config with the last positions before we close it. So we need that to happen for, but everything now. So that's everything down to window position. Pattern config equals config parser inline. Nope. So that's a different deal. That's loading the pattern in now. Right. So one's settings, and then one's the pattern. In any case, we will need these to be global variables again, which will be all of you guys. So back over to you. You in. And then game title is going to be a string. Original scale is going to be an array. Apparently, autoclick is going to be an array because it's the position on screen where it should be. Clicked. Run screen is equal to a whole bunch of shit. Repack screen. What does the repack screen function poop out? Return dicto. Does it return a dictionary, though? It would seem to. Yes, it does return a dictionary. Okay. I don't know why I'm doing half the things that I'm doing. It's been so long since I did this part of the code. I've learned so much since then, but run screen then will be a dictionary. Start screen will be a dictionary. All screens will be apparently just an array. And then run patterns. Looks like that's going to be an array containing a dictionary. No, that's a list expression. So pattern to dict. For n, and yeah, actually, I think it is going to be an array containing dictionaries. Let's just look at pattern to dict. That's this whole thing. And it does return a dicto, or at least it claims to, God knows. So then you'll also be a set of arrays. And then all patterns is equal to an array of the arrays. Wow. It's a lot of shit right there. So let's just comment this, that everything below here is the variables for patterns. And then from here, for settings. Okay with that? Yeah, and I'll even just bunch them all together. So that's all of the variables being instantiated at a global level, or at a, low level in the first place. And then when we were to call, like, the read file event here, all of these need to, like, access the fucking globals. It says it shadows the name pattern translation, which means now I need to... Fuck, man. Now I need to global my access to all of these. Let's start with you. I just can't think of another way to do this because of the nature of the program. because of how these two things work side by side, and the engine needs access to these variables, and the GUI needs access to these variables. And it makes sense for it to, these variables to be, you're handling them in the GUI, so you should be handling them in the GUI. If I globaled all of these now, window position, I think just as many as I can fit on the lines, basically. U, like that, comma, like that, comma. Just trying to figure out that efficient keystroke setup. Just put a comma there. Really? Okay. Well, fuck it. I'll just give you another global. So that global is all of the things that read the settings file, and I think I do need to split these. So this is going to be read settings. So there's all that stuff, and then once you get down to here, pattern config equals config parser.config parser inline comment prefixes, and then we read the file in. Funny that I don't do that beforehand on the other one. Huh. In any event, this would end up being, so, not defaults loaded, settings loaded, and then this would end up being its own function. Define read pattern. And we'll probably end up accepting a variable for telling us what that pattern is. In fact, yeah, file path. And then try pattern.config read file open resource path to file path. File path not found. Okay. And then for this one, I'll have to global all of these. I'll go back up to the top. Where am I? I don't know, man. I don't know. Is that you? Read settings, read pattern. Okay. On top of you, here's the list of these guys. And we're going to global it. Any way I could make this happen a little bit faster? Can I do that? There we go. Get into the swing of it. And we'll just start on a new line. There you go. Those are all now globaled, so we can access the outer ones, update the outer ones, and access the outer ones when and where we need to access the outer ones. Holy shit, man. Holy shit, man, that's a lot of shit that you're shit. But yes, it is. I can't think of a better way to do it. Personally, I can't. So, So that should all work. And the idea would be settings will load in the file name of the pattern file right there immediately. In fact, shit. So we just don't accept screen position. That's right, as an external, as a variable. And then we load it in before we call the super. So over in main 6, that should have broken some things. Settings underscore config dot set. Oh, it's broken some things, but different things than I thought. What am I working on right now? You've already been distracted by that. I am working on where we instantiate the window. So GUI window position. Yeah, you gotta go away now. You're just gonna, the window's gonna be a GUI. And this is the GUI class. And then what you need to do is, self dot load. It is a self, isn't it? Or read settings. So you'll read in the settings from the file to begin with, and then this plus screen position actually makes sense, except for that we need to access it globally. So global. Oh god, this is such a fucking mess, and it's only going to get more a mess. Global screen position. Okay. So we read the settings in, and that will allow us to instantiate the thingses and the what's notses. Are there any variables that we're calling? I'm just looking to see it, like, underlining something and going, you're trying to call a variable that doesn't exist yet. Managed to get through all of this stuff. When do we call the load patterns thing? I don't know, but for now, let's just, at the bottom of all this stuff, self.read pattern. Let's keep them together, shall we? What's your problem? Did you end up with an extra one for some reason? Okay. Keep them together. So we do the read settings there, and then we do the read pattern, and the pattern is going to have to be from the, what's the global that we're working on here? It's gonna be pattern file, pattern underscore file. So pattern underscore file. We will need to do an if check there. So it would be if pattern file is not equal to an empty string, then read in the pattern file. I hit start. Okay, list index out of range. When calling convert resolution on line 77 in main 6. Yeah, so now the GUI has to be instantiated before anything. So the GUI gets built. And then all those things happen. Actually, they probably need to happen before this, just to be sure. I don't know. Convert the resolutions. Yeah, actually, the GUI and then convert resolution. Convert resolution should be happening from within the GUI, actually. Where would it happen? It would happen on pattern load. So at the end of pattern load, you'd do this kind of stuff, I should think. Or read pattern, rather, in the GUI. So read pattern, patterns read and stored, and then convert resolution. I need global access to convert resolution too. Is that something I can convert? Can you access a public function like that? I mean, if it's a public function, I shouldn't have to actually do that, which begs the question, where is convert resolution stored? Control F, convert resolution. Ah, you're listed under the functions over here, and you don't want to be anymore. So all of these supporting things, yeah, a lot of this is basically I'm ripping the whole program apart. I should have actually saved this as main 7, just so that I'd have a version before I destroyed, you know, everything. So back over to the GUI. These are going to be public functions. We got pattern to dict. We got repack screen. We got you guys, convert resolution. Okay. Yeah, you don't like it when you want 2 blank spaces too. So those will be public deals. And then when I'm calling convert resolution way down here at the end of pattern, we're now okay with doing that. And then I hit go. Screen position is not defined in init on line 141. Oh, are you gonna like tell me, yeah, you can't do anything the way that you thought you could do it? Global variable screen position. And then when we do the read settings, we really should have updated the screen position. Print screen position name is not defined, and that is the one on line 138, which is the first one. So screen position is not accessible. Shit. How do I... non-local? No binding for non-local. How do I get access? Is this going to make a difference? Screen position is still not defined. I have not worked with globals before. In Python, or anywhere really. I would think that the way this works is at the beginning, you just instantiate that I want, screen position to, be accessed from the global screen position. It's undefined at the module level. Oh, is that the problem? What is it called then? Window position. Ah, that's the problem. Okay. I was going to say, don't tell me that I don't understand the basics. So window position, go. Ooh, it almost started up there. Okay, so line 276 in grab, width height equals monitor width, monitor height, key error width. On line 276 in MSS grab, so that's the library. Screen monitoring.py line 40 in screenshot. Shot equals numpy.area screenshot.grab area. Can't really be that either. In screen monitoring line 14, self.shot history equals screenshot cap area. From line 55, standby monitor equals screen test, start screen standby patterns. So I'm going to guess the pattern is what's broken here when I'm loading the patterns in. So the thing that really ultimately failed, maybe, is start screen or standby patterns. So print all patterns. And the patterns that we get, name area properties threshold. Oh, it's a lot. Print standby patterns. They seem to have been loaded in the way I would expect them to. Key error on width. Width, which would be inherited from the area. Area which is coming from cap area. Which is here. Okay, this is weird. The things I've done here while I was still figuring out object-oriented programming is weird. Yeah, cap area is empty right there. So that's coming in at the call of screen test, which is happening on line 55 in main 6. Print start screen standby patterns. They're both empty. So they were instantiated but not populated. Okay, then we know exactly what's going on. Which is that my down here or up here, where the hell it is, where I'm doing the read pattern, the global connections that I'm making here in order to try and like write to these things are not actually linking back to them. Pre-run patterns, right there. Standby patterns, right there. All patterns, right there. But they did work. We were able to read them from inside the GUI instantiation, where the GUI's initializing. We saw them there. And we're supposed to be updating them on the global level. They're being accessed globally from the bottom. From GUI v2 import everything, which means those declarations are being made. Everything might end up getting packed into the GUI. You know, as I'm looking at this, I'm saying, well, then the easiest way to get this, like, these things instantiated is to instantiate them, you know, initialize them in the window with the window instantiation. And then if I just let that happen, the initialization completes, and then I lock us into not the main loop, but my own version of the main loop. Standby patterns. In fact, go ahead and copy that. So when we just did this, like right after the read pattern was done, print standby patterns. And there's the standby patterns being printed. And there's a whole bunch of them. And they've all, you know, it's all laid out the way that it's supposed to be, presumably. Looks like it. So standby patterns is available there. And yet, here, it ain't. Here it's still just the initialized value of it. So it's like, what I would guess then is it's running off to do this stuff before this is finished initializing. Print pass GUI. See, but no, it's not. This gets done, then we're past the GUI, and then we're calling to standby patterns, and they're not available. This doesn't make any sense. And it's still empty there. So, you know? Is it still empty? And I shouldn't have to do that. That's why I was saying this is ridiculous. That was what was ridiculous. How is it that standby patterns is not accessible out here, or at least doesn't get updated on the global scale out here as soon as we exit the GUI where this is happening, even though we are accessing it on a global level. I clearly don't understand how Python handles its variable. What do you call that? Let's see. So Python global variables within a class. Global variable and class functionality. Create an in the bolded bit, I'm getting error. Created a global variable object. So what did he do here? Store equals that, message count equals that, and then he creates the class, and then from within the class, I don't see you calling the global, but so message count, you're wrapping it in stars. Is that how you access things globally? Not how classes work. Data should be stored within the class instance, not globally. Yeah, it should or shouldn't be, which is lovely, but like in the instance that you're doing something the way that I'm doing it, you got a whole program built around a certain structure and you can't undo it, instead of telling me not to do it the way that I'm doing it, how about you answer the question? So what is he suggesting? SMS store, self.store, self.message count, self message count plus 1, delete message count plus 1, SMS store. In Python, you have to specify a variable as global before you can make edits with it. Right, but I have, but it's not updating in the global path. Like it's updating within the class, but it's not then being handed back out. X is global, print X inside X, print X outside X, and then you're setting it to different things, I presume. X inside is global, X outside is global. You're going to change the value of X inside a function. X equals global. It's X, and then print X. It's X reference before assignment. So, to make this work, use global keyword. So, global variable, and it prints before assignment. So we use global C, and then C equals da da da, and then add, and then print in main C, and then it did hand it out there. But from within a class, you cannot reach the global level. Is that what we're talking about here? Like we can access the global variable, and it will be loaded in as a class variable, and then managed within the class variable. And so long as I'm working within the class, then the global will be variables across modules. Share a global variable across Python modules. Create a config.py to store the globals. Create a update.py to change global variables. Create a main.py to test changes in value. When we run the main.py file, the output will be 10 alphabet. Global in nested functions. So foo x equals 20, global x equals 25, and then 20, calling bar now, after calling bar 20, x in main 25, so it gets updated. So Python from within class. Global within class. This is the one we just looked at. I don't need generic, I need class as it relates to classes. Oh, good. Good. You know, okay, style, 50 Shades of Tutorials point. Alright, get rid of that. How do I create a global variable in Python class? And then he does not give a example that involves classes. So there's a douchebag. Apparently I didn't read the message there. Whenever you, that's the thing is about like trying to find anything about how globals function is always such a fucking mess, because either you get the stock like answer from the API that doesn't necessarily give enough information, or you get a bunch of dickheads who want to jump in and say, don't use globals, which is fair and fine. But you know, when you've got two entirely different like things going on with you got a tkinter window that's operating that needs access to these variables at the same time as like the core of an engine that can't be called, it can't be running within a main loop because it's separate from that, and both of these need access to the same set of variables. How do you get that done? And maybe there's a better way, but you know, point me at that better way instead of saying don't do it. How do I declare a global variable in a Python class, classes in Python, global variable in a function, local and global variables in Python? Can I create a global variable inside a function and then use... what it's looking like without actually getting an answer from anyone is that you can globally access from within a class, but you can't update the external variable. You can't actually write back to the variable that exists outside of the class when you global it in. Maybe the other option that just came to me is maybe the problem is... No? Then I need to global through the initialization as well, so that it gets all the way down to the bottom. Boy, that'd suck, huh? Boy, that'd fucking suck, wouldn't it? Yeah. Just more and more and more lines of bullshit globals. I mean, maybe I'll sit down and try and come up with a way that doesn't suck, but if I were to do that... It gave the same error. I've taken the printout that could have helped us, I presume. Let's put it back in. Back over to main 6. Where this error is taking place, which is on line something de something. Interesting. Should be up here, right? Yeah, line 54. So just before that happens, we print the standby patterns. Yeah, pertin. That's what I meant. Print the standby patterns, and we get an empty. So as long as we are within the class, then, you know, it works. Here we are printing standby patterns just after we've done the read pattern thing. And we're doing that from within the class, but not within the function that actually set these variables to global. So like the global declaration of what happened in the class has globaled them out to here, I guess, but not out to there. To there. I guess that's what's going on. That would make sense. So when I'm doing all of these setting of these variables, it's actually instantiating those variables for the first time. So if I were to just get rid of all this stuff, it would be the exact same behavior. name standby patterns is not defined in line 54, and that's simply because this empty variable now hasn't even been instantiated, but it's not being called to through the class. So you can't get back from the class to the ground level that way, which doesn't make any sense because, I mean, from within a class and its functions, I can totally call public functions. So surely I could call public variables and access public variables from there as well. And I know I can. It's very odd, is the thing. It's very, very odd. In fact, if I were to not global any of this shit, shouldn't it just see to the bottom? Like, if this wasn't, there were no globals put in there, and it's like, it shadows a name from the outer scope and stuff like that, and it's like, yeah, it should, because that's what I'm calling to. List index is out of range in convert resolution, which happens at the end of read patterns where I call convert resolution. And I'm handing this stuff back out that way. So, like, to get away from this globals concept, I need what? A disco doctor. I need this data to come in, being read by the file. So you're going out to, first, let's just think about the simple one, which is settings.config. So it's got all this data in the settings.config. I'm reading it in, and then I'm parsing it. So I need this data to come in, get parsed, and then turn into data that can be accessed from multiple positions, from multiple places. So either the data has to be handed in from the outside of the class, by which I mean you load it in with main6.py, and then we make the calls to it, handing that data in, or it's got to be done from within the GUI. But the GUI needs to be able to, like, I need to load a new file. So click here, and then it loads the values in, and those values need to be updated at the global level. I think maybe what I need to do is create either another class or make all of these variables something that exists within the GUI's class so that you can access, window dot lock to window dot pause when inactive, that kind of stuff. It's either that or I need to load all of these variables into their own class, and then when I'm loading the values in from the file, I'm actually calling to that class to reload the file. It says Random Aim subscribed. Thank you, Random Aim. Hello, Dramacian, by the way. Did that come up? You broke it. You broke it. Random Aim, congratulations. You broke the overlay. I will refresh it. Good thing you didn't send across a message or anything, huh? There we go. Yeah, so what the F? The Twitch app shows NerdCube going live, but not Pawn. Well, I'm not NerdCube, so who cares, right? I found the pay safe option, says Random Aim. Is that the option that breaks everything? And then, yeah. So that sounds like starts to make sense, doesn't it? That I make the data its own class. I make it its own little orb that's floating around out there that you reach into whenever you need the data. And then you can, change the data because it's all stored as public variables from the class of that data. Yeah. So I make a class where it instantiates with, loading up data from a file. And I tell it what file and the methods to use and that kind of stuff. And I get all of my data out there. So then instead of, like, making this less objects that are having to communicate between each other, I end up with, my main application that's doing the screen capture, which is one object. So there's one orb sitting out there in space. Then you get the GUI that's sitting out there in space, and the main thing is telling the GUI what to do. Like, okay, you can take a turn to update yourself, take a turn to update yourself, take a turn to update yourself, stuff like that. And then when either of them need information about the files, the variables that have been loaded in from file, or to refresh those variables, then there's a third object that is just the file data that's getting out there that, they both can like reach to and poke at and change. This would be changing that one, and then when this one goes to reach from it, it'll be changed in the place where it was changed in, and that's object-oriented programming, bitch. I mean, baby, we got it. Like, I'm there now. Wish I wouldn't have ripped everything apart and started shoving it into the GUI class, because it was a lot closer to that back when it was just all working off of config handler. Que sera, sera. I can go back, though. I've got a history, and I do still have config handler.py, I didn't rip it out of there. I just copied instead of like cutting. So config handler still exists, and I can just build this into an object. Yes. It's me always breaking stuff. You just don't know your own strength. About the breaking of the overlay. The backhoe class. It loads the container. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. That being said, can you break me, please? Says RMAJ. I can absolutely break you. By which I mean I can go to a break because I again need to pee. And also check in with my dad, and see when he wants to like get started on heading over to my mom's place for Mother's Day / preemptive my birthday that we're going to be celebrating today. If things go all right, I might start getting the sub monthly, all thanks to the pay safe option. I don't understand what that is. And yes, can always make time to break some more. We're gonna break. I'm gonna be back in 7 minutes to let you know whether the live stream just keeps on trucking, or whether I need to suddenly end it because my dad's like, we should get on the road. Oh. But 7 minutes now for me to pee and the other things that need to happen. Pawn not out yet. Hello, I am the Ronin Bone, and welcome back. My dad says just nothing. He's on the phone, so I couldn't mention it to him. I'm gonna plan to shut this down a little bit before, but around 1:15, we'll go for another 45 minutes unless he interrupts to say, "Hey, what are we going?" Which is entirely possible, but I'm gonna plan for an exit at about 1:30 here from here to there. So 1:15 is when I'll be wrapping this up. So, where are we now? I like this song, says RMHA. Which one? They were both by, well, it was on the screen, wasn't it? But it was Quantum Jazz? No, it was Jazzar. Jazzar. Jahzzar. Let's see. So, we need to back up. We need to back it up. Back that thing up in both of these files. So, hopefully I can just Control Z to before I started making all these weird changes. Yeah, I'm just not sure how far to go back. Okay, we're getting there. We're close. What's going on now? Me breaking things. I think we've gone past the point of return. I think that's back where that one was. And now if we go back over to the GUI v2, we start undoing. I'm just undoing all the stuff that I tore out of Config Handler and then tried to make, pack into the GUI here, because we're going to make Config Handler its own object in the class. I might have to just go back in the history on this one. Yeah, no, don't want you to even exist in here. Oh, and this was all the global stuff. Yep, gonna have to go back in the history on this one. So, for you, pull up my local history for this file. And back before I screwed everything up, probably, I don't know when. But so, convert resolution, that was a thing. If I go back to, I don't know, 11 a.m., big changes. So not that far, but maybe back to here. Yeah, I started inserting the global variables, apparently. Wait a second. So which one's which? Yeah, that stuff started going in, and before that, it was the... From GUIable, import that, from... And that's a huge jump in time. So I'm going to assume that that was good, and then this was where I started to F everything up. Yes, that. Take me back to there. Revert to there, and then see if the program starts. It does, and things still work. They still work. Control-Shift-C. Good. Yes, things still working. Excellent. Okay. Got it. We're back, and now we can start working on Config Handler as its own class, its own object. Let's see. Basically, there's a payment option for something called PaySafeCard, where I don't give my Bezos my banking life. It's about that. Oh, okay. So you don't give them direct access to your credit or to your checking accounts and stuff like that? I've gotten very comfortable with that. The bank, I got statements, I got email, I got all kinds of stuff tracking it back, and I'm just, it's just convenient, and it doesn't cost anybody. That's the other thing. It doesn't cost anybody extra monies with the transaction fees and things like that. So I'm all on board for yeah, go ahead, have direct access to my bank account. Yeah, go ahead, rob me. What are you going to get? Or rather, whatever you think you get, I'm federally insured, so whatever. If anyone knows how to Patreon without a credit card / PayPal, please let me know, says Random Aim. I believe you can do it straight from your bank account, but that's what you're saying, is you're not into that, right? Don't like to put bank info anywhere on the net. Yeah, that's fair enough. Can always find sites with other options for same function, even online shopping. None of that Amazon crap. Yeah, you could just send gift cards. That's the hot going scam that you pull on the elderly if you're running, internet scams is just to keep you safe, what we're going to do is we don't want your bank account numbers because you don't want to get that stuff online. What you want to do is just head down to Walmart and buy me a bunch of iTunes gift cards. And mail them to this address. And then I will fix your computer for you. Or rather, I've already fixed your computer. You just didn't know, Grandma. I've been doing it while we've been on the phone. No, the computer doesn't need to be on for that. It's amazing, isn't it? Internet? You don't have it? No, doesn't even matter. Wireless. Well, everything's wireless nowadays. No. Everybody's got Wi-Fi. It's always on. It's amazing, isn't it? Technology, the future. I used to be like that, but I buy so much online now, car parts, kinkware, and toys and games. Yeah, it's just gotta at least in America, federal government ensures, if the bank gets robbed kind of thing, and if your bank account is looted by someone who got access through something, and the other thing, the only way that these bullshit systems like credit cards and all that stuff can continue to claim any reliability or they have to back that shit up constantly, even when it's unfair to them. They still have to stand behind it and back it up, because otherwise people will start going, wait a second, this is insecure, and costs everybody extra money and actually raises the cost of everything that everyone buys everywhere, because all everyone who sells anything and has a credit card thing has to build the cost of the credit card processing into the price that you pay as the consumer, which means we all pay more because Visa and MasterCard exist. Not to mention Discover and American Express, which are even higher, but at least they provide a service. And they don't want people thinking, just generally speaking. That's just end of the sentence, period. They don't want people thinking. So it's not that you trust it, but you just have to trust it. You have to trust that people's greedy capitalist interests will extend to securing your monies if somebody comes in and robs them and you had nothing to do with it. And even if you did have a little bit to do with it, because otherwise that's just... So anyway, the config handler class. This all needs to be its own class and object now. Resource path, pattern to dict, repack screen. Resource path might actually be a function that we want to remain public, but these will probably be built into the class. And the class is going to be... what we're going to do here is we're going to build a class that contains the file access shit, so that when we instantiate... I've thought about this during the break. When we instantiate the GUI, we will actually pass the file access object to the GUI in its initialization. Then it can make a direct link to it and say, okay, this is where I'll be working. And then it can try on its own to load up the settings file, and if it fails, it can throw a code, I guess, or we could do that from within the GUI. But it'll all be happening within this class, and because this class object will exist outside of the GUI, that means that the GUI will be able to communicate to it because we've handed it a direct, reference to that object. And the main engine of the code that does the actual screen monitoring stuff will be able to access it because it will be instantiated alongside it. So there will be a reference to it that it can grab without having to know any more of it, about it. And we could pass that in, similarly to that one if it needed it. But so we do need this to be a class now, and the class is going to be just file access, I guess, is what we'll call it. So the file access class here is going to be initialized, and when it initializes, it's going to do all this shit. So settings config parser config. It's going to try and load in the settings file. If it can't, then it just exits the program. It throws up a message box error, and then it exits the program. That's fine. And then all this stuff it's going to try, and not all of this stuff either. Well, it's going to be off in different functions anyway. from now on. So when we initialize, we check to see if the falsies directory exists, and if it doesn't, we make it in case we have to write any falsies. Falsies is for false positives, false negatives, in the event that it catches one and notices that it just threw a false, event. It takes a screenshot of the event that it screwed up on, so that we can review it later. We open up the settings config off of settings.config. And I guess that should just happen, because that's always just going to be settings config. You don't get any options over telling it, well, load from a different settings file. Nope, just one. If it fails, it will throw up a message box on the screen that says, couldn't find the settings file, and then it immediately exits and nothing else continues. So that's A-okay. And then we start loading in all of the stuff that comes in from the settings file. That having been done, this should actually be probably its own little function, shouldn't it? Which would be, like, this would happen, and then all this. No, it'll be at that depth, I believe, maybe. But we need this to be a, like, load settings, is what we'll call that. Yeah. So load settings will do this part of stuff, and then we'll change this to say settings loaded. And then this will be load pattern, and load pattern will actually accept the pattern file. So we'll just say pattern file, because that's what it already uses. So those are now two different functions. Oh, no, you do like functions to be just one space between the two of them that exist within the object and within the class. It does this thing, file not found, exit. If you can't load the pattern, you just exit. That doesn't need to happen. I mean, it shouldn't in the long run. It should throw... Well, actually, it'll do something else completely, I think. So for now, I'll leave that like that, with a little comment like, this needs to do something more appropriate, because we're also going to have to test for whether or not the file that we're loading has, the file that the user has selected is like a file that looks like it's one of the files that we can load. And if we can't, we don't want the program to just die, throw an error and just completely die. Hologram1 just subscribed for 21 months, and chat is still working. Thank you, Hologram1. Wow, 21 months. The subscribe thing apparently isn't working today, I guess. And maybe cheers aren't working, because if subscriptions aren't coming through, I don't know. Does anybody have a nickel to throw at me with a cheer, just to see if the cheers actually pop up? Because that's the second subscription today that didn't work. So either Twitch has reset my credentials, as they like to do every now and again, or my subscribe function breaks in a million different ways. No, okay. There you go. It works. Thank you, On to Edge. The cheers still work. So, yeah, subscribe broke in yet a new and interesting way. Oh, okay. Now everybody's throwing cheers at me. We'll wait for them to come up to respond.
Hello.
Hello. Hola. Bienvenidos. What is that? That's not hello. Konnichiwa. Konbanwa, minasan. Hi. Yosh. Just waiting. Just waiting. There we go. Pawn, with all this cluster truck splitter poopies, would think you'd just code a better overlay. One that works. It's JavaScript. You can't make JavaScript work. That's why I switched to Python.
Howdy.
Howdy. Howdy. Howdy do. So in the initialization, all of these variables should be declared as public variables to begin with. Or actually, they can all just be declared here. What I need to do, I like when I get to do this, is go like that and then go self. And then all of those variables are now public variables. This will have to be self.reset key as well. So public variables of the object settings config is a local variable, and can it remain a local variable? I don't think I'll ever need access to that directly. That's the whole point of having this as an object. Same thing's going to be for you guys. So it's going to go like this, and it's going to go self. And there's a couple of them that need to go away. Okay, and then for you fellows as well, self. So we're just making all of these public variables that can be, accessed from another object calling to this object's dot all patterns and dot run patterns and so forth. There we go. So those are the two operations that need to be run, and they both need to be run when we initialize it. So we will do load settings, self.load settings, and then we will do self.load pattern using self.pattern file, because that will have been loaded in, hopefully. And this is where, now that I've got a class for this kind of stuff, it will lend itself to me doing error testing and catching and going, okay, did we load settings? Okay, we did load settings successfully, then try and load the pattern. Oh, we didn't load the pattern? All right, well then fail safe to this state. And having hard-coded default, backup settings for when the settings file doesn't exist. In fact, that's one of the things that I could do instead of having the I couldn't find the settings.config file. If I can't find the settings.config file, make and save a settings.config file from defaults, which we need defaults anyway, cause reasons. So if I were to say default and then one setting for each of these things, so pattern translation, so default pattern translation is actually default origin, we'll call it, and I should probably change the name of it to there. But default origin, and does this have to be selfed when it's before the initialization? No, because self doesn't exist yet. I've never really worked with class variables, that are variables of the class. Like, can I just access them that? Presumably. Right. I don't know how you access these things, but we'll find out once I've already put all the work in and then realize that I can't do it that way. So the default origin would be 0, 0, but the way that it's accessed before it gets written is, or after it's been read in, it comes to us in the form of apparently an int in an array. So it'll look like that for default origin. Default pattern scale will be default resolution. And the default resolution will be 1920 by 1080, presumably. Yeah, that's correct. Presumably it loads it into the array as integers just as the other. The reset key is going to be a matter of contention, but default reset key, we'll do the whole thing. Default reset key is going to be equal to 381, and in fact I think it's 381 is how that's going to be stored, usually anyway. Default auto clicker active, default, okay, It's big, long variable names now. Default auto clicker active. Big, long variable names now. Is a Boolean, and we're going to say that the default state for that is false. Default what? Lock to window. Lock to window is equal to also a Boolean, so it'll be false. Default. Pause when inactive. Pause when inactive. Also make that false. Have that be true and true. Actually, for the defaults on those. Default pattern file is not going to exist, really. Oh, isn't it? Well, apparently not. So it'll be none. Default live split host is going to be equal to localhost. And default live split port is going to be equal to whatever the friggin' port numbers are. 16834. And is that it? Default window position as well. So default window position is going to be equal to... How is it stored in settings? And when it's loaded in, it's actually as a string. So plus 100 plus 100. So it'll be in from your main window. It'll be there. Or it should just be nothing. Because if there's no window position, then the window manager will decide where to locate it. Yeah. Which will make situations work better. What do you think about 1:30 or...
Yeah, anytime now. It's 1 o'clock now, so yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. So window position, yeah, because it'll handle situations where your main screen is not the screen that you usually open things on or something like that. You know, it'll just, whatever the window manager thinks makes sense is what it should do. Effing eBay sellers, what'd they do? I got this replacement screen and it came with no adhesive on the sides to attach to my phone, obviously defected, so I opened a return. They haven't responded back, so I have to ask eBay to step in. I have $25 sitting in eBay credits that I have had for years. When I sold something on eBay to someone and they never paid, and you know, after like 2-3 weeks of giving them every chance, I finally had to file a claim on the buyer who wouldn't buy. And eBay, instead of just, you know, refunding the money to the place where it came from, presumably PayPal or a credit card or something like that, decided to give me a $25 credit. At the time I was like, what the hell ever, I'll probably use it. I haven't. eBay is just not a thing in my life anymore. So I need to find something to buy on eBay. Maybe something that, you know, just something that just makes that noise. No insinuation there. So, falsies, load settings, load patterns. That'll be, so we've got defaults now, and my thought was to make it so that we try making this, and then if it doesn't work, if it doesn't work, then we write the file.
Vai ao Luigi.
My Ouija? To communicate with the dead. Yes, absolutely, Germasian. I will, and you know what would help with communicating with the dead? Some ganja. That would help. So I'll get the Ouija and the ganja. eBay is such a shit show, but there's things you can only get on eBay and not Amazon, like car parts and stuff like that. Yeah, there's a lot of cheap stuff on eBay that you can get there for better used stuff and things. It is like back in the day, I was an eBay seller. Sold a lot of things on eBay and had an account with, I can't remember how many, like, thumbs up and closed sales, and probably over 1,000, because of what I had started doing at that point, which was selling knives. I bought the knives in bulk that you can buy from the weird guys with the katana swords cutting themselves in half accidentally on late night TV. And then I broke up the whole like giant kit they sell into smaller kits and would sell those off. And it was a slow trickle of income that struggled to actually make more money than was originally spent. Oh, good idea. But it did eventually work out. It did work out. I did make a little bit of money there, and then I sold a whole bunch of laptops on eBay as well, and whatever that account was, I don't know, or at least I've got an idea what that account was, but I don't know what the password was anymore. So now I've got this newbie account that doesn't have any positives on it, and I tried to sell something, and somebody bid on it, and then I went to sell it to them, and they didn't pay me for it. Probably thinking, well, it's a newbie account. He's probably a scammer anyway. It's like, dude, don't bid if you think I'm a scammer in the first place. Just whatever. But so, yeah. How could I do that? Config parser dot config parser. Like the idea would be, I just have to do it manually, wouldn't I? You'd kind of have to do it manually, is what you'd have to. Would I? Yeah, you have to do it kind of manually. I see. It'll be the save to, though. We're going to need a function for saving to the settings file as well. So like a function define save settings. So I'll just put it up here for now because it'll be easier for me to see what I'm working with. So save settings, it's always going to save to the settings file. And that will be, it'll start out like this, one would think. Well, no, don't need to do that line, but settings.config read file open resource path. Settings.config equals config parser. Okay, yeah, I do need to do that, don't I? Yes, you do. So settings config equals config parser.config parser. Sadly, inline comments are just not going to be, I don't know how I'd write to the file with inline comments. So for now, fuck it. I mean, I'm taking out the need for that by making it all so that you can actually just change the settings from within the program, aren't I? Settings.config, config parser.config parser. So we make up our settings file, imagine it into being, and then I don't actually remember how to work with config parser stuff. When I write back on exit over here in main 6, oh wow, main 6 is just freaking out right now. Look at all that red in the corner there. When I write back settings config.write config file with open resource path settings.config w as config file settings.config write config file settings config.set GUI settings position F. Alright, so this is sort of what I'm looking for here, is whatever's going on in that one. So just get it over to this area. Settings config.set. So we want, the first thing that goes into it is the pattern translation, or in other words, the origin, which is called the default settings monitor origin. So default settings monitor origin, and we want to write to that the default origin 0 and the default origin 1. And you don't respect the idea of that, so do I have to self it? Yeah, okay, so that's apparently how that's going to work. Now I know how you access class variables. Idea between behind a class variable is, you know, that every object instantiated will have that same variable, and that variable will actually be shared across all of the objects of that class. So if you change it for one class, you change it for all classes. Not really the usage that I'm going for here, just, you know, had to be somewhere. Might as well put it where I put it. So we need to do this, but like 1,000 times, by which I mean like 10 or 11 more times. So you're going to be the default settings and the monitor resolution. So what I'm doing is packing my data into this config parser object that I've made, and then the config parser will write it to the file when I tell it to, because I am master, and you're going to do what I tell you, biznatch. So instead of default origin, it'll be default resolution. Resolution 1, resolution 0, and resolution 1, sure. And give me another one. You're going to be next up, would be the reset key, apparently? Is that correct? If we just look at the settings file, yep, reset key is next in the file. So reset underscore key. And the reset key is now this is another matter of contention for me. In fact, this would be like this, because when they get written, I make it into a string. Yeah. Because I need to go back to how the reset key is handled. But I need to do one thing at a time too, so if we just do what we're doing right now, then it will be default reset key 1, or reset key 0, and then default reset key 1 for you guys. Next one is going to be the auto clicker active, so default settings, auto clicker active, and the auto clicker active is a boolean, so we will be setting that simply to, I guess it should be a string, because that's what that's everything that config parser handles is strings. So if I convert it to, like, I should just say string of, and then default self dot default auto clicker active. Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Next one, because these are going to be booleans, I'll now copy that one. The next one down in the list is from the auto clicker. It's going to be lock to window. Lock to window. And you're going to be default lock to window. And then after lock to window is pause when inactive. I just start typing def and then pow, and then it figures it out for me. And then pattern file. And this doesn't need to be the string of anything because it is a string in and of itself. and that's going to be default pattern file. It self.default pattern file. There you go. That should be fine. And then what's next? Live split host, going to be very similar. It's already a string, so if I just default live split host, and then set you up as... this is under a different thing. So it's going to be host, and it's under a completely different area. So this isn't default settings anymore. This is live split server. Like that. And then live split server port, right? Port. And then live split port. Except for I will convert it to a string. I don't know if I have to. Maybe I don't, but I did. And then GUI settings. Is that where it comes in? Yes, it is. So that's going to be GUI settings position. And then it's going to be F. No, it's just going to be nothing. Because this is actually a... Damn it. Can't get myself to do it. Window position. This is going to be a string to start with as well, from where we're reading it. So when we want to save the settings, I've written this to save the defaults, as opposed to save the settings. Shit. Alright. So when we do want to save the settings, we should be saving the settings based not on the default origins and the default resolutions and all that kind of stuff. We should be saving them based on what their, true values are in memory. And then when we do need to reset to default, we would set all of those values to the default first. We'd have another function in here that would, set to default, and it would pass the origin into, and so forth and so on. You want at least some default settings, which are amazing. Yeah, I'm just doing it in the wrong way. I shouldn't have written this function to use the defaults. It should use the true stuff all the time, and then I should have another function that passes default origin into the into the values that we'd be querying. So that would be changing all of these to pattern translation. Pattern translation 1. And then you would be pattern scale. Pattern scale. This one would be reset key. Reset key. You would be auto clicker active, because this is also going to function as the one that we just call when we want to write our new settings back to the file. Lock to window. Pause when inactive. Pattern file. Live split host. live split port, window position. Yeah. So that's the save settings thing. And then the idea would be, when we make the call to load settings, define set defaults. Now defaults is going to set these values to these values, which should be a little bit easier to do because I can just say self.pattern_translation is equal to self.default origin. Yeah, because they're both formatted the way that they should be when they're residing in memory. So self.pattern scale is equal to self.default resolution. Self.reset key is equal to self.default reset key. Self.auto, not cephl, self.auto clicker active is equal to self.default auto clicker active. What's next? Lock to window is equal to self.default lock to window. Pause when inactive is equal to self.default pause when inactive. Self.pattern file is equal to self.default pattern file. Pattern file. Self.live split host is equal to default live split host. Live split port is default live split port, and the window position default window position. So that sets all of the defaults, and it'll call from those, and it'll populate our actual current, residing in memory. So when we load the settings file, we try to read the settings.config file. If there's a file not found error, then we will actually, instead of doing this stuff, we would call set defaults, self.setDefaults, and then we would call self.save_settings. So we'd make the file, and we'll already have loaded in the stock shit into memory anyway. What? You heard me. The idea of the window position being nothing, yeah, that can be nothing. Yeah, everything else is good. Okay, so we need in the save settings for this to actually write back to, the file, which we will do using the same code as this, right? So, user config handler with open resource path settings.config w as config file. Will that allow me to create a new one, though, if one does not exist? Is that config.write config file? No. So open resource path settings.config with the write attribute as config file, and then settings.config.write config file. So we're writing our settings config to that file, which we've opened as settings.config with write access. Yeah, that should work. So now, instead of throwing an error and being all bitchy about it, it'll do those things. And then actually this would now all be in an else statement. Because it will only happen if we succeeded on opening a settings file that already exists. And then we'd have to load all that stuff in, but because we've used the set defaults command on the file found error, then these will all be populated with the default results, and we don't have to do all this shit. Bing. Bingo bango. Load pattern now needs to have something similar going on, and we do need to be able to write back to the pattern file, but it's very specific places. It's just the active or inactive state of something that gets written back. Searches for a config file, and if none is present, it creates one, says Jermacian. That's exactly correct. That's what it's doing. Via this code right now, when we call load settings, if it can't find it, then it sets all of its values to defaults, and then it saves it. Saves them. And this function should also allow us, because it's been written to just take whatever the values are of these files and put them into the file correctly, should allow us to save the settings at any given point once they're live. Yeah. What else needs to happen here before I've got a functioning version? Because we've got 2 minutes before I need to end the live stream, basically. All of the places that have red on them need to be a thing. We need to call the object, and then all of these need to have the object, instantiated, and then this happens after the fact. So what I've just said to you right there, little translation is, we've come to the end of the show. I am the Ronin Bond, and I'm heading north to see my mother for Mother's Day and pre-birthday celebration. Celebrate my birthday a little bit earlier than it is, because, combine holidays, so you don't gotta make as many trips. I'm heading north. My dad and I are gonna stop off at Micro Center and look at all the tech gadgets and buy me probably an Adafruit, which is an Arduino-like microcontroller device.
Real life? Is this just fantasy?
No, it's actually really happening. I'm leaving. Thanks for coming out, everybody. I will see you next time here on twitch.tv/ohshit.